I'd like to echo what Lucas said, that certainly the development of a mothership that can take care of the transport, the Delta V, the comms would enable an awful lot of stuff, including what I'm going to tell you about here. So just like Lucas' concept, this was also funded by NASA's PSDS-3 program, Planetary Science Deep Space Small Sat Studies. These were 6-month feasibility studies done last year. And ours is called the Mars Ion and Sputtering Escape Network. I'll explain if you want to what that is. So I'll tell you here, first of all, is why the science of planetary aeronomy, that's what that is, needs multi-point measurements, as was mentioned 2 talks ago. And then I'll tell you about the missing concept, science objectives, payload, the mission design, etc. And just one thing to notice, that there's a competition for, there's a call called Simplex 2, a proposal due in about 2 months, and there's 2 other very similar competing missions, so I'm not going to give you maybe as much detail as some of them, because this is a competitive environment, and I know these talks are public. So hopefully it'll give you enough to give a good sense of what we're doing here. Okay, so why do we care about measuring plasma and magnetic field in planetary environments? There's obviously a range of planetary environments, including planets with intrinsic magnetic fields and not. This is just 2 examples here. This is schematic diagrams of the solar-wind interaction with Mars and with Venus here. And one major reason just to make these measurements in the first place is to understand the structure, the composition, variation, the dynamics of plasma within planetary hemispheres as the solar wind interacts with the difference. There are a difference here is that Mars has these crustal magnetic fields, which you can see in the lower left here. And this was the focus of the MAVEN mission. The 2 important atmospheric escape processes that we worry about are called ion escape and sputtering escape. And understanding how these work is important for understanding the evolution of the climate of the terrestrial planets, in particular Mars here, particularly since the early sun was much more active in the UV and the solar wind was probably faster and stronger, etc. And it drives these escape processes. So understanding them today in detail helps us extrapolate backward in time to the total effect that they had over the course of history. This applies to both Mars and Venus here. This is just a schematic showing a photon ionizing a molecule or an atom in the upper atmosphere of Mars. You create an ion, you have the solar wind and the convection electric field embedded within that solar wind. That can pick up the newly ionized molecule and drag it away. And this is known as pickup ion escape. And this is a schematic diagram here showing the direction of the solar wind electric field, the velocity of the solar wind. The sun is to the left, and this is a simulation showing pickup ion escape with the colors representing the energy of the particles. However, if the magnetic geometry is different, that same newly ionized particle can actually be accelerated back into the planet, and just like jumping into a swimming pool, it can splash out, it can transfer its momentum to the particles in the process. That's sputtering escape. So these are the 2 planets. Now, we already have a mission that's measuring these processes at Mars. It's called MAVEN. MAVEN is the first spacecraft to do this. Mars Express has done this as well. But the point that was also made earlier is that a single measurement platform leaves major questions unanswered. This is showing about, I think, 8 months worth of precessing orbits of the MAVEN spacecraft with relation to the different plasma regimes, plasma regions that surround Mars. Black is the solar wind flowing from right to left, at least this left panel here. And then the solar wind is, it encounters the conducting optical of Mars' ionosphere. It slows down, it heats up, it's diverted around the planet in this sheath region here. The magnetic field piles up and also drapes around the planet in this yellow magnetic pileup region, and then does this magnetic tail. But this single measurement platform leaves questions unanswered in the sense, one, spatial and temporal variations in escape fluxes or in any plasma parameter cannot be distinguished. If you see something change, you don't know whether it's moving across you or you're moving across it. So that can't be done with a single platform. 2, the responses of changes in escape fluxes to changing solar wind conditions, which typically it takes about a minute, maybe 2 minutes for a solar wind disturbance to propagate through the system and affect often quite drastically the rate of atmospheric escape. That takes about a minute or two. If you only have one spacecraft, you have to wait an hour, 2 hours until you actually, since the last time you measured the solar wind. So you don't have that real-time response, which is important to understand the physics of escape. And when you have big space weather storms that come in and drive huge increases in atmospheric escape rates, you have to try to quantify those responses from just a single track. With all this interaction happening in the spacecraft, it's just one single track. So these are the reasons why you do multiple points. And this was the case for terrestrial space plasma physics. In the 80s and the early 90s, from the single spacecraft that had flown before that, it was very, very clear you couldn't characterize the plasma boundary dynamics with a single spacecraft. And so multiple spacecraft, this is the cluster mission, the Themis mission, the MMS mission, the Van Allen probes, really created a revolution in the understanding of the terrestrial space plasma physics environment, allowing time-resolved 3D measurements to create a more realistic picture of the Earth's magnetosphere. So similarly, multiple spacecraft are the next step in understanding the solar wind interaction with unmagnetized bodies like Mars. So this brings us to our mission concept called MAVEN, Mars Ion Sputtering Escape Network. The objective is to characterize the magnitude, the structure, the variability, and the real-time response to changing solar wind conditions of ion escape and precipitation on Mars. And the idea is to make in-situ measurements of ions, electrons, and magnetic field from 3 small sats in elliptical orbits, about 250 by 7,000 kilometers, spaced appropriately in terms of their orbital elements to ensure upstream measurements of the solar wind the vast majority of the time, and simultaneous measurements of the different plasma regimes surrounding Mars. And this is an example here. This is a simulation of the oxygen precipitation on a sphere 750 kilometers above Mars, and showing 3 sample orbital geometries that would allow us to look at that. The payload is pretty simple. It just consists of a magnetometer, and this is a clone of the Mars Insight magnetometer that just launched a few weeks ago to Mars. 2 of them mounted halfway and at the end of about a meter-long balloon. They're very small, they're very low power. And then an electron and ion ultrastatic analyzer from a kind of design that we've been building at UC Berkeley for many, many years. We're planning on distinguishing light versus heavy mass ions through close height analysis when different masses of ions hit the microchannel plate. They create different heights. So this is a new way of doing that, which is a lower mass way to do it. How do we get to Mars? We looked at a number of different options, just as Luca's project did, because we had similar requirements to get to Mars from Earth. We rejected the GTO option because of the radiation hazard. So this particular point design is for a ride-share Psyche mission launching in August of 2022. 15-month electric propulsion cruise to a rendezvous with Mars, and DSN contacts every 2 or 3 weeks. So these are the thrust vectors looking down on the solar system. And then phase 2, after we are captured by Mars' orbit, we spiral down to science. That takes about 11 months after we match Mars' orbit. The great thing about this approach is that when you do a chemical orbit insertion to Mars, you are limited in what kind of orbit you can get. If you use solar electric propulsion, you can literally pick any orbit you want, any inclination you want, any argument of periapsis, etc. So the plan is to do that next orbit about 11 months. And then we get into our science orbit. And when we chose our science orbits, we need them to be high enough to ensure that any particles that we see coming out from Mars actually are escaping, because these are charged particles moving in magnetic fields, and they have curved trajectories. And if you're not high enough, you're not sure that an ion is necessarily escaping, and then low enough to ensure that if you see something going in, that it's actually going to precipitate into the Martian atmosphere, and it calls that sputtering escape that I showed earlier. These are just a schematic of those two processes happening. We need to pick our orbital elements, the RAN, that's right, essentially the ascending node and argument of periapsis chosen, so we get sufficient coverage of the different sufficient simultaneous coverage of the different plasma regions around Mars as the orbit naturally precessed due to Mars's asymmetric gravity field over the course of 1 year's mission. The orbits are reasonably stable, though we'll probably need some monthly phasing maneuvers, and we haven't quite worked out those details yet. The spacecraft itself, similar to similar in size to what Luke had talked about. It's about 27 U, maybe a little bit bigger than that. The idea is to keep it 3-axis stabilized for the purposes of thrusting to get to Mars, but then we want it to spin, and we've figured out the right combination of sun trackers and star scanners that will work with a 16-second spin period. We will have to most likely despin every beat to talk to Earth. That's not ideal. We're still hoping that we can just point the spin axis at Earth, but that's still under study. But that's something that doesn't cost too much fuel to spin down and back up again each week. We have these gimbal solar panels that will allow us to spin this way while also seeing the sun. And the idea is to use the arid radio, either X-band or hopefully, I know they're planning to develop a Ka-band version. I'm not sure exactly how far they've gotten in there. A Marco-style antenna, which is this antenna that comes out and then opens like that. There's a little transmitter is in front of it. And this is our nominal schedule here, launching in 22 and going until 2025. And this is our study team. This is the different institutions that are involved here. The main institution is UC Berkeley, where I am. That's where we have our project scientist, our management, our assistant engineering, where we'll make the ion and electron analyzer, the instrument digital processing unit as well, and we'll also make the boom. Then we have science advisors from CU Boulder. We have UCLA making the magnetometer. Our mission design is done by Advanced Space. Jeff Parker is one of the founders of that company. He has a lot of JPL navigation experience, and so he's been designing our trajectories with making Arid. And our spacecraft is being provided by Tyvek LLC. There are major contractors there. The ion engine that we're planning to use is still under discussion. Luca's mission had already selected a specific one, and that same engine that Luca's mission is using is one of the ones that they're looking at as well. One of the issues with Hall effect thrusters is that they suffer erosion, and the smaller they are, the quicker they erode. And for some of these long duration missions, when you need 4,000 hours of thrusting, it simply will, the walls of the Hall thruster will just erode away. And so that is a problem, and there's different companies with different approaches to trying to get around that. But the question of whether a Hall effect thruster or like an electrospray array is a question that I think all these sorts of long duration interplanetary missions are worried about. Anyway, just to summarize, I should also say that we're also planning to fit inside the $55 million cost cap, which is less than 1/10 of what the MAVEN mission cost. So yeah, we're hoping to provide simultaneous multiple measurements of the plasma environment around Mars to understand the real-time response of the magnetosphere to changes in the solar wind we cannot do right now, and reveal the global structure of the different escape processes so that we can understand them better, to understand the history of Mars and evolution, and hopefully build on its legacy for a small fraction of us. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. It was very nice. So you are dedicating your mission to the low altitude around Mars, and I was wondering if you cannot benefit of the few months you will experience parallel trajectory around Mars to explore the really high altitude of the influence of the magnetic wake of Mars, far from scientific trajectory.
Yeah, certainly. So one of the major efforts that we've undertaken is to choose the three initial orbits such that we get sufficient simultaneous coverage of the Martian magnetic wake at the same time as we're seeing the dayside magnetosheath and the solar wind, so that we can understand how energy is transferred from the solar wind through these different plasma regions into the wake, where a lot of the ion escape happens. So yeah, we are planning to have there's a somewhat campaign aspect to it because the orbits will precess as they do, so you don't always get the measurements of the wake at all times, but certainly periods of several months at a time when we can get that data.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the problem with electric propulsion, the thrust you're having over the light. But another problem is their powerful source of magnetic interference. How are you going to keep the spacecraft magnetically clean enough for the magnetometer while you have big fixed magnets in the ion thruster?
Well, okay, so the ion thrusters are going to be turned off when we're actually doing science. Yeah, sure, and we'll characterize those extremely well before launch. But in terms of probably maybe the fine details of exactly how that's done, I think that's still TBD. But there's going to be no variable magnetic fields when we're taking data.
You showed a nice plan to study Martian plasma environment and solar wind planet coupling. My question is partly related to the previous one. So how much do you concentrate on studying solar wind itself, and could you do it with this concept?
Yeah, we could actually. One of the results of our orbit optimization study was finding times when we have all three spacecraft in the solar wind. And if you wanted to, you could optimize those orbits to look at, say, different scale structures in the solar wind as they impact Mars. And that's going to be one of our science goals, to understand variability in the solar wind structures that impact Mars on temporal and spatial scales. But that's not our primary goal here, because we're applying to NASA's planetary division for this money, and so the Helio division has its own separate set of goals.
Any other questions? Okay.